facial animation for an animator, even with our tool set, would be a good 3 to 4 weeks. If we don't get that right, then simulations break. I'm Barrett, and this is how we created the Na'vi and the creatures in Avatar: The Way of Water. Any animator, before they start a shot, they give us the ground and we're going to animate on that ground, and you're not going to change it. But obviously with water being liquid, we start with something that we think is going to be, the correct surface, the thing that we can reliably animate to, but things can change very quickly. It's really critical that any interactions with, a character or a boat or a creature with the water, it's really critical that we get the buoyancy right, that we're inferring mass correctly. We did have tools that would simulate to the water, but it's a really tricky thing. It really did present challenges, especially that interface. I think underwater, not so bad. Obviously above water, you're okay. But as soon as you get a creature or a character, perhaps even falling into the water, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of simulation, a lot of back and forward between the effects team and the animation team. Water is, I think, 800 times denser than air. So the way that something travels through the air versus what happens to the travel of that object when it hits the water, it's something that I think viewers are used to seeing. If we don't get that right, then simulations break. So that's a real challenge. You can also see that there are, actors are sitting on bucks and we're capturing their performances, and there are people, moving those bucks to try to infer the motion that ultimately is going to be seen in the shot. But really, when it comes down to it and the shot's being created, the creatures are going to kind of do what, Jim may want them to do later. So one of the challenges is taking those performances and then making them work on, a different bit of motion. We've captured it on a buck that's doing this, and Jim may want it to do this. He'd still want that performance. So the animators have to very carefully, use their skills to take that performance, preserve that performance, but make sure that the body of that character makes sense physically on the creature. There's a bunch of work to be done there for the team. Fun shot for an animator to work on. The Paikon's performance is based on reference that we had of Humpback Whales breaching. There was some performance capture here, but a lot of this is the animator's work on what LOAC does. What you're seeing in the breakdown is you're seeing the various simulation engines. Water's a really complicated thing. There are sort of multiple states that we identify. The large mass of water when it's disturbed by a whale, and then you get a sort of a smaller spray, and then through to the little droplets. So what you can see here is it broken up into those component parts. These simulations, they take an awfully long time, and having them broken up, it's slightly easier to have control over, the way that the simulations would look. The most challenging thing to animate in Avatar, the thing that we consider to have the most importance, are the facial performances. This scene here was one of the first that we worked on, but this was the first time we really tested out the new system. The face cameras that are sitting on the booms on their helmets, there are 2 cameras, whereas in the past we had a single camera. The 2 cameras gave us the ability to recreate the actors' faces in a 3D environment. So that's what those cameras gave us the ability to do, to reconstruct the faces. And we used to use a thing called blend shapes, which was based on the surface of the face, and we'd look at the face and we'd infer what muscles were being fired, but what we would do is create these shapes in the face, and we cared more about the surface rather than the interior, the muscles of the face. In the new system, we had a database of the expressions that these actors were capable of or were most likely to use during the film. We gathered those expressions in sessions that Jim had with the actors, where he sat them down in a booth where they were facing an array of cameras, and he went through their entire role in the film with them as they sat there. Amazing to see someone like Zoe go through the emotional arc of her performance in the film, all within a 2-hour session in a chair. That gave us all of the expressions that she was most likely to use in the film, and the new facial system took those expressions and used them as a database that it would search when it received the performance from stage, which is what we're seeing here. You can see these performances, and you can see how subtle they are. There's so much range and so many of the performances in this film. The new system did a very, very good job of capturing all of that nuance, and giving the animators a fantastic starting point. Animators would then look at the reference cameras that we're seeing here. In the reference cameras, you can really read emotion much more easily than you can in a face cam. So the animators would use these reference cameras to get a sense of that emotion and make sure that we are getting all of that subtlety. And a lot of that is in the body as well. With facial animation, it's it's as much about the head as it is about the lips or the eyes. I remember it took us a long time to get this shot of Jake where it really just wasn't reading that well. It was lacking so much of the intensity that that Sam had in his performance. And it took us a few goes looking at it before we realised that his head was just a little off axis. It was a couple of degrees off at most, but it broke the entire shot, and it took us a wee while to figure that one out.
Avatars only, go round.
Whoa, bro!
Yo, monkey boy.
The performance capture suits that they wear, they have dots on them, and these dots can either be reflectorized or they can be active. So sometimes you'll use an active LED. In this case, these are infrared and these are passive reflectors that capture all of the body data. In that virtual space, what you can see is we'll also scan all the actors. So, we'll have a Sigourney scan. We'll have a model of Sigourney that has her exact proportions. Those dots you see in that virtual space there, they sit in the same world space as you see those dots on the suit that Sigourney's wearing. So that's something that we use during the solving process just to make sure the data has come through cleanly. And we'll take that then from there and we'll push it through onto the characters. 10 seconds of facial animation for an animator, even with our tool set, would be a good 3 to 4 weeks of careful animation, and then beyond that, there's everything else that needs to go into that shot. That's simulation for clothes and hair, the environments, the lighting, the renderings. A shot or a sequence of that length, you would expect to see that going through the pipeline for, a good 6 to 8 months. The system that we've developed at Weta is called the APFS. That is an acronym for Anatomically Plausible Facial System. Ropes are hard and tails are hard. We had to animate about 4,000 tails, at least 4,000 tails on Avatar Way of Water. All of the Na'vi have tails. The Kaya people, the forest people with the more standard cat tail, and then the Metkaina with their crocodile tails. And so the tails are always a particular challenge for animators.
So what does her heartbeat sound like?
A lot of the success of the production schedule was all the planning that took place with the team at Lightstorm before shooting began. And one of the interesting things about the way that this film was shot is Jim kind of shot it twice. He shot it with all actors in their motion capture suits with the performance capture side of things, and then a lot of it he would shoot again in live action. In the past, you might have someone like maybe me on set who was hopefully holding a tennis ball in the right spot, but the number of times that fails and you're having to fix things, nothing worse for a compositor to hear than, can you just change that eye line, can you change those eyes on the plate? It's a really hard thing to do. Yeah, it was a real success. My favourite creation, I think, would be, I like Quaritch. I think the way that Stephen Lang played Quaritch, I think that he's such a great character, and I think we see a little bit of nuance in his character in this film.
Only 2 shots in the entire film don't contain visual effects. Can you share with us which 2 shots in the movie don't have visual effects?
Those shots didn't come across my desk, so I haven't seen those shots.